Hello, everybody. Welcome to Flannery Genealogy Videos. My name is Brian Flannery. Today, we're going to discuss a little bit of backstory on Bob Nickels. I want to share some of this with you. Let me go back up here to the top. I'm going to be reading this off of a paper, but I can read it off the screen just the same. But I also have this information was given to me. This is off the internet that I'd saved, but also a lady at my church gave me the same information in an email that was forwarded. So I want to read this to you, and so you'll kind of know the story. And at the top of the page, this is from Curt Davis. This email is from Curt Davis to Patrick Nickels. And I think Patrick forwarded it to this person that Wilma had received it from. So I want to read this, and it says basically on the top, hang in there, Patrick, you'll find the truth. Have you read this before? I found it on the internet one day and sent it to Rusty. This Curt Davis writes for the Kentucky Explorer and has other books. And this is from Ruth. And I don't know who Ruth is, but basically it's titled The Harper Nickels Feud, written by Curt Davis. And before I go any further, Curt Davis has passed away, and I tried to find out maybe to get permission to do this, but he has passed away, I've been told. So I'm going to read this verbatim, so bear with me. For many years, the Harper and Nickels families lived harmoniously on the Mock Ridge as two of the community's oldest settlers. Allen Harper and two brothers came to the Mock Ridge from Virginia long before Elliott County was formed in 1869. The two brothers moved on westward, leaving Allen as one of Mock Ridge's first settlers and progenitor of the Harper family on the Mock Ridge and other areas of Elliott and surrounding counties. I have been unable to determine the first Nickels settling on or nearby the Mock Ridge. Many of the eldest citizens say they were among the first settlers in the area and that there were no animosity between the Harpers and Nickels families until May 22nd, 1911. Many of them of both families were not abstainers when it came to taking a drink of good moonshine, whiskey, or any other intoxicant, good or bad, and often let everyone around know of their inebriated condition by firing their pistols. Oscar Harper was a crippled young man that loved his booze, and though harmless, was most aggravating when drunk. Most people tolerated his annoyance and said that his drinking was to ease a feeling of self-pity because of his crippled condition. I was told that he was never armed. He was just, quote unquote, one of the good old boys that loved to drink and, as he called it, quote, have a good time. On the afternoon of May 22nd, 1911, Bob Nickels was traveling westward horseback on the Mock Ridge near a spot that many might remember best as the Rex McDowell house. It was evidenced by Bob's loud, occasional screams, followed by the firing of his pistol that he was drinking ferociously. Just west of the McDowell house, he turned south on another much less traveled county road or wagon trail. A few minutes later, Oscar Harper came along riding horseback. He was drunk and following Bob Nickels. Whether intentionally or not, no one will ever know. He also turned south on the same wagon trail that Nickels did. No one ever knew why or all that happened that afternoon on that county trail except that Bob Nickels killed Oscar Harper. Why kill a small, harmless, unarmed, and crippled young man? The Harpers asked themselves. Many other people in the neighborhood, knowing both parties well, also wondered and whispered quietly to each other, why? Bob Nickels was questioned about the murder of Oscar Harper, but Nickels refused to talk, even to deny it. The court was Circuit Judge J.D. Hanna of Sandy Hook, the prosecuting attorney John W. Wall of Grayson. The Harpers could not understand the delay in getting an indictment for murder in a trial. They employed an attorney, J.H. Sparks, from Olive Hill, to investigate the situation to see if any evidence could be brought to get an indictment and a conviction. Every effort failed. The torch of hatred and revenge between the Harper and the Nichols families had been lit throughout the 10 miles of from one end of Mock Ridge to the other, and neither family hesitated to let it be known. Hesitated to let it be known. For the next 10 years or more, the vengeance and the animosity between the two families kept smoldering, and everyone knew that real trouble was likely to erupt at any time. The men of both the Nichols and Harpers were usually armed at all times, and other people wondered when and where the explosion would surely happen. Tuss Nichols was a nephew of Ed Nichols and Bob Nichols. Elmer Harper sold Tuss Nichols a buggy. He was never paid for the buggy. Tuss joked about the matter. A few years later, James A. Harper was having what they call a quote-unquote land sale. He was not selling his land. He was selling the livestock, the farm equipment, the household goods, and everything but the land. While at the sale, Elmer Harper and Tuss Nichols got into an argument about their buggy deal, and Tuss told Elmer that he would never pay him for it. They got into a fist fight that lasted for several minutes, and the venom of both sides aroused. Several members of each family were at the sale, and each family eyeballing the others and waiting for any movement from anyone. Later, Jim Nichols said that if Elmer Harper had not accidentally fallen down as he walked toward the barn that day at the sale, that he would have been killed. Nichols said that he had dead aim on Elmer and was waiting for the man walking behind him to get out of the line of fire when he accidentally fell. On December 21st, 1920, there was church at the old mock church house that was just across the road from the present site where the WPA later built a 2-room native stone school building that still stands. Both Harpers and Nichols were there. Most of them were drinking heavily and shooting around the church. One of the windows of the church was shot out, which fearfully disturbed the church. Ed Nichols and Russell Harper had an argument that ended in a fist fight in the churchyard. Ed's sister tried to intervene, and she was knocked down. Nichols got on his horse and hurriedly left the church ground, racing toward his home. Russell Harper immediately jumped on Estill Harris's horse nearby and started in hot pursuit after Nichols. Ed Nichols heard him coming and quickly stopped in the middle of the road near the McFarland place. He turned the horse crosswise in the road and stood behind it with pistol in hand, aiming across the saddle. Russell Harper had not counted the shots that he fired in the churchyard. When in close range, he drew, aimed, and pulled the trigger. His gun snapped. He had spent all the ammunition that his gun would hold in the churchyard. Then Nichols fired. His first shot went high through the saddle skirt and into the horse. It knocked the horse down, and with the second shot, Ed Nichols killed Russell Harper. I talked to Russell Harper's 90-year-old widow. She told me that, quote-unquote, that old Ed Nichols had hidden behind a tree near the McFarland place to wait for Russell to return home from church. Others that I talked to said that Elmer Harper went to the tree she spoke about later that night and trampled the grass and weeds down around the tree to make it appear that Russell had been ambushed, and they would be able to make that plea during a trial in court. Vengeance and hatred was on a violent rampage throughout the area. The officials in office at the time of the trial in 1921 were Edwin Porch Morrow, Governor J.H. Woods, Circuit Judge of the Judicial District Fred M. Vinson, Prosecuting Attorney of the District J. Braskew Green, Sheriff of Elliott County. Matthew Redwine and son John Tennyson were defending Ed Nichols. I am sure that Judge Woods, living in Olive Hill nearby the Mock Ridge, realized the perilous situation and called Governor Morrow for some protection during the trial. Governor Morrow was known nationwide for his strong belief in law enforcement. In Lowell M. Harrison's book on governors, he cites that Morrow spoke out forcefully against the Ku Klux Klan. In February of 1920, he called out the National Guard to protect Will Lockett, who was being tried for murder in Lexington. In 1921, he removed the Woodford County jailer for failing to stop a lynching of Richard James. In 1922, he sent a platoon of the National Guards to Newport to quell a mill strike. Harrison further states that Morrow was so well known for his firm stand on law enforcement that he was offered a place as vice president on a winning ticket. It seems that Governor Morrow was quick to take action during any dangerous situation that existed where the people needed protection, and only he could order the National Guards into Sandy Hook. I was 11 years old when I saw a platoon of National Guard soldiers riding horseback coming into Sandy Hook. A short time before, I had seen my brother Bill return from service in a War I uniform, and I quickly recognized the Yogi Bear hats and the wraparound leggings. I realized that they were a platoon unit of the National Guards. They set up camp in pup tents back of the courthouse in my grandmother Ward's pasture field that bordered the courtyard on the north side and the Little Sandy River on the south. Their horses grazed in her meadow. The only exception were 3 of the soldiers at the end of the first day of the trial asked permission to go home with the sheriff, Braskew Green, and spend the night in his home. Judge Hanna and the captain of the National Guard unit gave each their permission. Instead of taking them to his home, he took them to the home of one of his favorite moonshiners. 3 days later, the sheriff and the 3 soldiers returned to court about half drunk, and one of the horses had been shot in the flank. Governor Morrow immediately removed the Sheriff Braskew Green from office and appointed his brother Elijah Green to serve the remainder of the sheriff's term. The trial proceeded as scheduled. Prosecuting attorney Vinson was able to prove the ambush story untrue. He had Harper's saddle, with the bullet hole showing as exhibit number 1 astraddle the railing in front of the court and jury. During his closing arguments, he walked over and climbed astride the saddle where he spent the last 5 minutes, and as he talked, he continuously moved a forefinger around the bullet hole in the saddle. The verdict was 24 years in the penitentiary, according to Russell Harper's widow, and she added, quote unquote, that old Ed Nichols was out in 5 years. Through almost 80 years, there have been lots of conversations about the feud and the trial here in Elliott County, but more about the National Guards. Today I talked to an elderly man, a former banker in Sandy Hook, who had just returned from Florida, where he has spent the winters for years. I mentioned the trial to him. He said that he and another grandson of my grandmother's were at home the morning the soldiers decamped. He said the 3 horses that were with the sheriff and the 3 AWOL soldiers for 3 days and nights had saddle sores because the army saddles were not padded, and the 3 days and nights had been too long for the horses to go saddled. The captain ordered those 3 men to walk and lead their horses. Since Frederick Moore Vincent, 1890 to 1953, a noted jurist from Louisa, Kentucky, later became one of the country's great chief justices of the United States Supreme Court, I thought it proper that this bit of history be told. After 80 years and more, the first person After 80 years and more, the first person that I told that I wanted to gather all the information I could write a report on it was a Mr. Nichols. He said, "Now don't you start that darn thing again." I then mentioned to a Mr. Harper and told him what Nichols had said. He laughed and said, "That's crazy talk. People have intermarried so much around here the last 3 or 4 generations, no one would know which side they were on. Do it. If it's history and it needs to be recorded, there aren't many left that can remember it." Curt Davis, May 16, 2000. So that's what we have as far as the story. Curt Davis's account. He's done the research on it, and seems like he's done pretty thorough. Of course, this is before Bob Nichols comes to Greenup County, and I'll try to share some more as I go along. I've not went back much farther on the information here. This is really the first glance I've took at the trial and different things. So there's been a history of violence with the Nichols family, not knowing, not knowing the whole story, and that we're over, right at 100 years past. So, just wanted to share that with you today. Hope everybody enjoys this video. Please comment, like, and subscribe to my channel. Um, we try to share this, and while it's rainy and winter time, we're trying to do a lot of this. So hope everybody enjoys, and tell us what you want to see, ask questions, whatever. Just comment in the comment section, and thank you all for tuning in, and hope you have a blessed day, and God bless.